დღეს ბოლო დღეა და რაღაც ცოტა ხელოვნურად გამოგვივიდა წელს ქართული პროგრამა და უცხოური პროგრამა გავყავით, მაგრამ ამას ჰქონდა ლოჯისტიკური და ფინანსური მიზეზები. მაგრამ მეგანი ჩვენთან რჩება, 2 კვირა იქნება თბილისში, სხვათა შორის პენცენტრის რეზიდენციის ამიტომ ვისარგებლეთ ამ შესაძლებლობით და კიდევ ერთხელ შევაწუხეთ და ვთხოვეთ რომ მოსულიყო. You will need the headphones probably because if there are any questions or something. So Tamta Melashvili, Megan Nolan, რომელსაც ესაუბრება Davit Gabunia.
So, thank you for coming. Good evening. We are going to talk about love, as I was asked to prepare for this. And it was a very confusing thing. And in these days, while reading, and in your case reading, and in your case rereading the books, I was just, this question was sort of hovering above my head. And I said, actually, what do we talk about when we talk about love? To steal this famous title from that good guy. But without further ado and without occupying too much space, I would start immediately with a question to both of you. So all my questions will be to both of you, and then I really hope that our guests, our audience will join us with the questions, so you're more than welcome to ask questions. So my first question will be, I will go to the very beginning. So to your early years, to teenage years, maybe even childhood. So who were the authors and what were the texts, maybe particular ones, if you remember, you read and were impressed and were influenced by, and were the authors that defined what is love for you. So where did it start from? So books about love from your early years.
Maybe Megan is a guest and you start.
So I have 2 answers, one kind of pleasant and one unpleasant. So before I had any sort of sense about romance or love at all, when I was about 9, I read Little Women, and obviously the story of Jo and, you know, the competing demands of writing and her love life are very relevant to, you know, ended up being very relevant to me. And so that was definitely a formative thing that I thought, okay, you're gonna have to work out how to be a writer and be in love. That's something that's gonna be hard to combine. And then when I was a little bit older, but not too much older, about 11 or 12, I was reading a lot of books that I was a bit too young to be reading because the library in our town burned down, and then when they re-established it, they didn't refile the books properly. So they had a lot of the adult books in the children's section. So I ended up reading a lot of books that were very inappropriate when I was about 11. And one of the books that I read was The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides, who's a Greek-American author, and that became like a very, very formative book for me. And the movie that Sofia Coppola made as well. So I would say like the way that ended up influencing my ideas about love is that the story is about these neighborhood boys who collectively worship this family of sisters who are very beautiful. And it's sort of told in, you know, a quasi-collective, anonymous style that they're all unrequitedly in love with these girls. And they collect these little tokens of their obsession and photographs and scraps, and they kind of build this monument to their unrequited obsession. So I definitely got the feeling and impression of love that it was to do with obsession and that it would be unrequited.
I'm really afraid to name the authors now, but most probably they were male authors, classics of course. And then it took ages for me to unlearn all the things I learned from them about love. When I started experiencing love, experimenting with love, etc. So I think it was kind of part of, you know, when you are given the ready-made scripts or scenarios, this is This is love, and it also comes from literature, apart from culture and apart from institutions. So this is how to love, this is how to kiss, this is how to have sex, etc., etc. And then later in your life, you do realize that love really comes in all forms and shapes, and you have to find your own. And what I have found, it was totally different from the one I read from the male classics, of course.
Okay, so again, my next question will be to both of you. Both your books, the novels, have got tons of reviews, and they're best-selling. Tamta's book is a big bestseller in Georgia, and hopefully will be in some in Poland. It was very successful as well, and so. But in Georgian reviews, in your case, and international reviews, in your case, very often, not very often, but quite often, people mention, call them the text provocative texts. So they are sort of provoking something, and do you, is this provocation, whatever that might mean, intentional for you as authors, or the problem lies with those who feel provoked, who are kind of gentle, and whose ears are so gentle that they find it sometimes provocative? So what does that mean? So again, like, is it your intention to provoke, to somehow to use this unapologetic tone and explicitness, including like sexual explicitness and many more things? So what is that? Provocation planned, or just like that?
I definitely didn't, have a decision to provoke in any intentional way. But I guess while I was writing it, I was aware that some of the things that I was writing could do that, and I wasn't trying to prevent that from being the case. I think there's two layers to what you're saying, where there's a very basic level of being provoked, where some people don't like to read about sex at all, and that's even describing any physical act like that is going to be not upsetting, but not appropriate to them. So, that we can kind of leave aside, because they're probably not maybe my intended readers. But there's another level, I guess, that I was interested in being honest about, or trying to interrogate in my book, which was that the woman has a lot of different kinds of sex, and she really likes having sex, but also sometimes the sex she has is very destructive for her. But I didn't want it to be a narrative about all casual sex being wrong, or all sex before or outside of love being wrong. I wanted to have, which was the case in my own life, was that sometimes those things were good and they were for their own sake, and sometimes they weren't. And I think sex, like food or alcohol, is interesting because you can partake of it in a healthy way or a very unhealthy way. And sometimes the line between those things is very blurry. And so I think I wanted to have a woman who was not ashamed of having sex like that, but was also honest about the fact that it couldn't be destructive. And I think that was difficult for me to try and straighten out for myself, and possibly also was confusing or jarring for readers sometimes.
Well, in my case, I think that the love story in my novel, which is one of the layers of the text, is not provocative itself. It's just an ordinary love story that can happen to anyone, anywhere, at any age. But I think that the main protagonist, is provocative in the way how she lives, how she chooses to live, and how she goes against all the grains, or against all the expectations that society or like her community expects her as a woman, or as a middle-aged single woman. So, of course, when you're writing, you are not thinking that much about the provocations, though. I didn't even think about provoking the reader when I was writing the sex scene, for example. It was just, I wrote it and I liked it. And yeah, it was something new for me as well. But yeah. So it depends how the reader or the audience, wider audience, receives the text, how they interpret the text, and if it's provocative, okay, let it be provocative. Why not?
Unapologetic is a good word. I think, Sandra, you are
yeah.
not sorry. Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you find it disturbing, just don't read it. That's it. Okay, and stop whining on the internet also. Okay, so a silly question now. So, what is your books? Are your books about lovelessness or love? Cool. That was cool.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think my first book, the one that is translated here, is I always think about it as being as a person approaching love, almost allegorical to religion. Like she kind of has this place for love in her life, romantic love in her life, that is akin to how I think of religion being in some people's lives. As in, it's something beyond herself, something that she considers pure and that she can aspire towards, and feel almost virtuous about. But in her case, it ends up being a very destructive faith to have in this love where she invested in the wrong place. And I think, the backdrop of this character that I've written, she does have very evident love in her life outside of the romantic love story. She has a very close relationship with her father. She has friends, but she's not interested in those things because her idea of love is actually a warped one where it's all-consuming and it takes your entire identity, and it's not actually nurturing or supportive of you as a person. It removes your personhood. So I think she is focused on a kind of love that either doesn't or shouldn't exist, and doesn't really rely on the real kinds that are in her life.
I think that love and lovelessness they somehow go hand in hand. They exist like really together. So I think that my books are on both. And I remember that once I was told by one of the readers when she read Blackbird that, oh, this is the kind of a book which makes you want to fall in love once again. And I was thinking, oh, should I take it as a compliment? So I don't really have the answer for this until now, because I think that Blackbird is not only about love, it's also about lovelessness. And when you're craving for love, or when you need love, and especially this goes to women because we are somehow we are somehow encouraged to have these feelings, like these huge feelings, and express these feelings, and then we are looking for these feelings everywhere, and mostly we don't find them, or what we express, so we don't get the proper response we need to get. Then there come these gaps, or I don't know, which are really painful, and which really need experience and time also to come over, or to even heal. So this is a complicated process. Of course, this is very complicated in life and also in writing. So yeah, it's not easy. It's really easy to write about love, but it's quite complicated to talk about it. Like especially when the audience expects from you like the answers very wise, nice, intellectual, and I'm really suffering now because I really want you to feel at least connected with my responses, but I'm not sure if I'm doing
please
that
go
now.
read the books, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And now I have again another question to both of you. A couple of years at least passed since the publication of Acts and Blackbird. And how do you see these books now in retrospect? So what meaning do they still have for you? So how do you see these books? Let's say if you were to advertise them now, write a blurb or something like or the little annotation of the book. So what is still there that is important for you in the books after a couple of years of publication and after after the fact that you have already moved on, like sort of written another book, you're writing, busy with something else, and so on, right? So why those books again?
Yeah, it was interesting because when I was writing my book, the first book, I was very conscious that I was writing, like by writing it, I was in a process of trying to escape the situation that I was writing about. And I was functionally also, I was in my life leaving the kind of time in a person's life that I was talking about in this book, which is, you know, early 20s, really struggling to feel any solid identity, to know what you want to do with yourself and with other people. And it wasn't that I had it all figured out by the time I started to write the book, but I definitely knew what I didn't want. And I knew that I didn't want to be dependent on loving a man for my meaning. And so I was very conscious that as I was writing this, I was creating a life for myself by becoming a writer that would help me escape the situation in the book. So it was kind of quite an aware process in that way. You know, I didn't know that the book would ever be published, but I had some feeling that if I could make something worthwhile out of that experience, then I would have, you know, not solved it or anything, but I would have sort of put some sort of exorcism. I would have gotten rid of it for myself in some way. So I basically feel like that about it. It's a document of a very specific time in my life, and the people who I meet who are reading it now, who relate to it, you know, it's often chiming with a very particular couple of years or year in their lives. And I feel obviously the further away from that person that I get, I feel a bit softer towards the character, because when I was writing it, I started writing it when I was 26. The character's about 22, I think. So, you know, I was quite near to that time myself, and I felt a bit cruel towards the weakness and the, you know, whatever, her dependence. Whereas now, I'm 35 and I'm a little bit older, and I can look back at girls who are 22 and feel, including myself, and feel more tenderness towards them than maybe I did when I wrote the book. And yeah, I mean, I reread it last year to prepare for a talk that I had to do, and I hadn't read it in maybe 4 years at that point. That was interesting. It's difficult to, it's almost like juvenilia at this point. Not that I'm not even saying that I'm so much better a writer, but its concerns are almost juvenilia in a sense for me. And so it's a bit embarrassing on some level to read it, because it's, intentionally it's very raw and honest and so on. And so it's a bit exposing to read it now, but I am very proud of it, and it makes me feel happy that people are still reading it, especially in different languages and countries.
So if I wrote a blurb about Blackberry, I would say that it's a story of a very stubborn woman. And I didn't see Tero as a stubborn one when I wrote her, when I created her. But later I realized that she's the stubborn one. She has this stubbornness I really admire in women, which I don't, unfortunately, I myself don't have. And this is the kind of stubbornness which really makes her powerful. And this was the kind of characteristic I found out in her quite later. And as Megan said, I also think that the books the authors write, they have their special time and place. So if I wrote Blackbird now, it would be a totally different thing, of course. I wrote it when I was 14, now I'm 46, like the whole 6 years are gone. And I'm getting closer and closer to Etero's age, and I would say that I understand her better and better, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I would love to be as stubborn as she is.
Okay, next question is about men, about male characters. Interesting thing, like main lovers, there are plenty of male characters in both books, but I mean, Kieran and Ulman,
he doesn't have a name.
He doesn't have a
name. I did it on purpose. So Murman is the name Elena Veriani created.
Yes, it's in the scene in the movie. Yes, so
the movie needed it.
I'm not paranoid. So, okay, so these two men, they are exclusively seen and depicted and shown through this very subjective prism, or the subjective viewpoint of these women, their lovers, right? And actually, I could say that we don't have them in the book. We have these women and only their lenses, so to say. And these guys, both of them, neither of them are actually there. These are these images the women created out of them. So the images they fell in love with, we could say. So why is that so? I don't know. So what kind of guys, what kind of men are these people, actually? And yeah, that sounds like a silly question, but still.
Yeah, no, I think it's exactly right what you said. I think that in my case, Kieran is, you know, he has some traits that are genuine, which make him perfect to be projected on. So, you know, he's remote and he's aloof and he's kind of cold to her, and so he has these qualities that make him a good subject for projection. But yeah, I think that it's not that it could have been anyone, because the person, I think, would have to have those qualities, the withholding qualities, to enable the projection. Yes, exactly. Yeah, but attractive, handsome factory settings. Yeah, but yeah, I think that you can see in my book that the character, you know, ostensibly what she wants is to force this guy into loving her and to being her boyfriend, and then when she starts to actually access parts of him that are private and real, she's actually quite repelled by anything that is true in his character. You know, she meets his father and she kind of gets a glimpse of, you know, a kind of disgusting almost glimpse of why he is so cold, which is partly because he has experienced parental neglect or, you know, borderline abuse or some sort of negativity in his childhood, and she doesn't really, you know, it's kind of disgusting to her to have to even engage with the real parts of him, because she's obsessed with, yeah, this image that she's trying to control. And yeah, that was important to me to have in the book, that, you know, there's a, you know, it's not to do with blaming one or the other party, but there's a lot of the book where she is experiencing obvious, overt mistreatment from this guy, and I wanted to be clear that she also is mistreating him by making him into this prop for her delusions. And so, you know, there's that's not to excuse the more overt cruelty that he doles out in the end, but also she has dehumanized him as much as he occasionally does so to her, because he is, you know, he's a prop for what she wants to believe love is, which is not real.
So to look at male protagonists through the lens, as you said, of female protagonists, it's a kind of political thing for me as well. Because what I used to read before, like for years and for years, it was like looking at women through male gaze and through male authors. And it's kind of also a natural thing, because I'm a woman writer. I identify myself as a woman, and I see the world as a woman. So, and I didn't give the name to the male hero, and I did it on purpose because I didn't want to write about a specific person, about a specific man, but I somehow tried to generalize a specific kind of a man under his figure, let's say so. Because I think that he's a good man, he can express his feelings, he can express his, yeah, he writes poems. Yeah. He has this a range of, like, this really wide range of, wide spectrum of emotions which he can express. He's good at sex, so, yes, but not all men are like this, so, but I really preferred, and I really enjoyed writing this, you know, this, about this specific, like, better kind of man. Sometimes you can meet in this life, so. Sometimes, if you
like a fairy tale, why not? Okay, so I wanted to ask again about the final transformations of your main characters, the protagonists, in how the books end, right? So how do you see this transformation, the final transformation? So what actually happens in their lives, and what are the main things, like main elements, as you see as authors, like what was intended maybe or not intended, but it is there still. So what has changed in them, and what is this main shift in the lives of these women?
So the ending of my book, or like the final quarter, say, I don't want to spoil it because I know there's a couple of people who are still reading it. One thing I will say is that what I liked about writing my book was that it allowed me to play out some scenarios which had existed in my life, but play them out in a much more dramatic and theatrical way than I did in reality, and to exercise these impulses I had in reality but did not play out. And so the role of infidelity in my book is very almost like operatically destructive at the end. And I think that's something that a lot of people do in real life, is that they want to end their relationship and they don't know how, and they don't feel like they're allowed to, and they cheat instead, and that keeps them out, and they destroy things in that way. And that's a very common impulse, I think, when people are too cowardly to leave a relationship. And so in my case, I made her do that, but like 10 times over, and in a really insane and grotesque and violent way. And so I think that was just kind of a fun catharsis for me to write, because of having her act so badly was a fun thing to write. But I think the reality of that I do relate to and did experience in my own life was that I had to kind of burn down a certain part of myself and my relationships and my life to become the next part of who I was and who I think I am now. Which was, I left this relationship in Ireland and I kind of just moved to London the next week, and I hadn't planned anything, and I quit my job and left and didn't tell anybody. And it was, for me, it was a stupid decision, but it was necessary to just blow everything up in one go. And so I think that's what she's doing at the end of this book, is she's sort of setting fire to everything because she knows she's too cowardly to do it in the more conscious way. Ideally in every situation that you realize is not right for you, you would respectfully say to everybody involved, no thank you, I'm done now, and I'm going to move on and be a different person and have different interests and different concerns now. But in reality, most people find it very difficult to admit that what they were doing up to this point was not good. And so it's very difficult to consciously say, you know what, I made a mistake. And instead, I think it's not atypical for people to just explode everything instead and walk away and then, have to rebuild from the ashes of whatever that was. So I think that's how I think of her ending in the book.
Well, I think that love is transformative on its own way in life and of course also in fiction, because you are totally different when you enter the love relationship, and you are different when you leave it. So, and it can be like two extreme edges. And it also depends at what age you fall in love. So in your 20s, it's really something different, and in your 20s you are really very vulnerable and very beautiful in so many ways, and also very innocent, and that innocence can be exploited in so many ways if the things go wrong and if love becomes abusive or toxic. It's different in 30s, it's different still in your 40s. So it also depends on how much how much experience as a person you have when you enter the next relationship. So and I think that love is something also that gives you the possibility to grow as a person. But it's not necessarily so that it doesn't work smoothly like this. If you somehow go on the same circle in every relationship, that it becomes really, then you really need a therapy. But still, I think that love is something beautiful, can be something beautiful, can be something that really gives you the opportunity to become a bit better person. I don't know. It really makes
to go back to my question, so is she becoming a better person in the end? Is it a cathartic finale or something like... What is this transformation in the end?
In Etero's case. Well, she's different for sure. She has been transformed for sure, but I didn't know how much this transformation is connected to her final decision to make abortion or not. So I don't know, because I don't take responsibility on her final
Volume
decision.
2. So we
Yeah.
need the sequel.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, actually, guys, I need your help now. Please,
Yeah,
questions.
we really had short answers.
Thanks a lot. I'll ask. I have one question for both of you. This question is somehow linked to each other, and it's about the nameless nameless character. In Megan's case, I've read Tamta's book already, and I'm reading your book. Both of your books are very, very interesting, and I'm very fond of it, both. And in case of Megan, well, when the character is a female and a female reader is reading the book, this reader somehow wants to identify herself with the main character. This is very natural, I think. And why doesn't she have a name? It's because you wanted to as many readers to relate with her as possible, or because you disliked her that much that you didn't want it to relate yourself with the main character. And I'll ask for I'll ask a question for Tamta as well, and then I'll listen to both of you. Tamta ქართულად კითხავ. მამაკაცი პერსონაჟი, რომელსაც არ აქვს სახელი, ეს უსახელო კაცი არის სრულიად უმნიშვნელო ეთეროს ისტორიაში და მისი ხაზისთვის და ამიტომ არ აქვს მას არავითარი კონკრეტული რაღაცა, ანუ სახელთან ხო ბევრი რაღაცა ასოცირდება, მაგალითად, როდესაც სახელი გესმის, რაღაცნაირად წარმოსახვაში ამ ადამიანს რაღაცა შტრიხები ემატება, ხო? და აი სპეციალურად არ გინდოდა რომ ეს ადამიანი მამაკაცი ყოფილიყო რაიმე სახით საერთოდ მნიშვნელოვანი და ძლიერი ქალის ხაზი ყოფილიყო გატარებული, თუ რამე სხვა მიზეზი აქვს, რატომ არ აქვს მას სახელი. მადლობა. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I didn't think about it consciously at first. I just realized after I'd gotten through some of the book that I hadn't given her a name yet. And then I thought, oh, okay, I better give her a name. And all of the ones that I tried didn't feel right. So I thought, okay, I'll just wait till I'm finished and I'll think of one then. And then by the time I did it, I kind of liked the way it felt without a name. I think there's two reasons for that. One of them is that, you know, a lot of the book is meant to suggest how free of her own solid identity she is, and how she's looking for that from Kieran and from other places. So that was sort of partly to suggest that amorphous lack of identity. And then secondly, I really wanted if I had any conscious aim with the book, it was that I wanted it to be very immersive and for the reader to be, psychologically in there with her. It was, meant to be extremely subjective. It's not meant to be an accurate portrayal of a certain life. It's meant to be like inside of her mind. And so it seemed like maybe not having a name was another way to suggest, okay, you're not meant to be looking at this woman. You're meant to be the woman as you're reading this.
I didn't give him a name also to show that he's not his story. He with his story, with this love story, is not the main thing in her life. Of course, it's something really crucial that enters her life, but it's one of the crucial things that can happen to you. But it's not the most important thing, because he enters her life and then she somehow makes him leave. So he really makes one of the very important layers in her life, but it's temporary. It comes and goes. So definitely it's not the love story that to which the character is so much fixed, to her whole life. Because for me, this is the novel about solitude as much as about love, for example. So the solitude is one of the main topics for me. And I really loved the readers who, who found out the solitude there. So as a beautiful thing. Oh, that's the answer. If I answered you, I don't know.
Კითხვები, questions? Oh, დიახ, გისმენთ.
Ალბათონო მეგან. მე მინდა თქვენ ირლანდიაზე გესაუბროთ. ირლანდიაში 10 წლიდან გაიზარდა ჩემი შვილი, ბრუკლინში. მე მინდა უფრო თქვენთან არის ასეთ მამა ლოტერგანი. თუ ხართ ამ რელიგიაში ჩაფლული ან რაიმე იცით. ლოტერგანი ასეთი არის თქვენი ირლანდიელი ქართულ ეკლესიაში წირავს.
I'm afraid I don't. I don't think I've heard that name.
ჩვენ ემიგრანტებს როგორ იცნობთ?
I actually don't know if I've ever met a Georgian person in Ireland. There's a large Polish population, but I don't think many Georgian people.
როგორ არა? ირლანდიაში დუბლინში და სხვადასხვა ქალაქებში არის ქართველები. მათ იქ მწერლებიც არიან და პოეტებიც არიან.
საქართველოში ვიზიტის შემდეგ დაინტერესდება და გაიცნობს სავარაუდოდ.
გამარჯობა. მეგან თამთა ორივე ძალიან მიყვარხართ. ერთი უცნაური კითხვა მაქვს, არ ვიცი რამდენად არის უცნაური. თქვენთვის არის თუ არა, იმიტომ რომ ორივე რაღაც ესეთი მებრძოლი ტექსტი არის და არის თუ არა წერა შურისძიების ფორმა და როდის წერთ, როცა ბრაზობთ თუ როცა ბრაზი გადაგდით.
Shuri's is revenge, right? No, I don't think that writing for me is a kind of revenge, but because I really separate my life, my personal life and my writing, because I have never written out of fiction, for example, whatever it is. So I have the pleasure in creating protagonists rather than copying them from life. So these are really two different things. For me, it's a really good question, but I don't think that I have ever used writing or any of my protagonists to have a revenge. I have lots of other different forms in my personal life to make this really good revenge, you know. I don't need writing for that.
I don't think that I have ever done that through writing a character or situation that I've experienced. So like there's no character in my books which resembles a person who has wronged me in my life. But I think that part of why I became a writer seriously was that, well, quite directly, I had this relationship with an artist who was like not very interested in me because I wasn't an artist, and at the time I worked in an office doing like very low level administration, and he just thought that wasn't cool, you know. And so I took my writing more seriously because I wanted to impress him, and then I started to do better, and I started to make money as a journalist, and that made me able to write creatively more often. And honestly, I think a lot of why I became a writer at that point was to impress somebody, and then to take revenge on him, I became more successful.
ეთილი და პატიოსადი ჩვენ წიგნებზე ავტოგრაფების და ამის საშუალება, like I'm talking about the book signing that can be outside. And then one more question.
მე მინდა ასეთი კითხვა დავსვა. მამაკაცი ავტორები, რომლებიც სიყვარულზე წერდნენ 100 წლეულების და 1000 წლეულების განმავლობაში და დომინანტურები იყვნენ და ქალი ავტორები, რომლებიც უკვე ამ ბოლო პერიოდში მოძლიერდნენ და ამ შემთხვევაში რამდენად შეიძლება დარჩეს მამაკაცი ავტორის მიერ აღწერილი სასიყვარულო ისტორია ჯერ კიდევ საინტერესო ქალი ავტორისთვის ან ქალისთვის თუ ეს ყველაფერი ნელ-ნელა გადავა იქეთკენ რომ ქალი ავტორები წაიკითხავენ მხოლოდ ქალი ავტორების ქალი მკითხველები მხოლოდ ქალი ავტორების წიგნებს თუ მაინც ეს აუცილებლობა დარჩება თუ მაინც არის ეს მომენტი რომ მამაკაცი ავტორი ქალს მაინც ვერ გაუგებს ბოლოს მაინც აქეთკენ მივდივარ თუ არა
მოდი ქართულად ვუპასუხებ Megan I will answer in Georgian okay იცი რა თუ ავტორის საინტერესოა კაცი ავტორი და ზოგიერთი თანამედროვე ავტორი ჩემთვის ნამდვილად საინტერესოა რატო არა წავიკითხავ იმიტომ რომ თანამედროვე კაცი ავტორები რომლებიც მე მომწონს ცოტა ისეთ სიტყვა მაინტერესებს მაინც რაღაც თავისუფალი არიან იმ ძველი კლასიკოსი კაცების ხედვისგან და შესაბამისად ჩემთვის საინტერესოა მათი წაკითხვა რატომაც არა მაგრამ გული როგორც ქალ მკითხველს მაინც ყოველთვის უფრო ქალი ავტორებისკენ მიმიწევს იმიტომ რომ ჩემსას იქ უფრო მეც ვნახულობ თუმცა ეს არ გამორიცხავს იმას რომ წავიკითხო კაცი ავტორებიც ამას როგორც მკითხველი ისე გპასუხობ და ხო როგორც მწერალი არ ვიცი ხო როგორც კაცს მე არ შემიძლია დავწერო და არ მინდა დავწერო და როგორც ქალი ვწერ
So yeah, I think what you said reminds me a bit of there's a conversation. I don't know if you guys would experience this as well, but in the UK and the US, there's a lot of discussion about why are there so few new young male novelists. And sometimes, I think we're okay, but also partly I think the reason for that is that novels used to be much more prestigious and they used to make more money, and maybe the men are just making more money doing screenplays or something. And partly I think that the reason that men maybe are less, or maybe women are more known for writing love stories now, is that in centuries past, marriage and all those things were more part of like a pragmatic and economic lifestyle than we think about them now. So I do think there's a big shift in the fact that we don't think about marriage as, before we didn't think about marriage as a purely emotional gambit. It was something different. And I think that there was a more male perspective because back then men had the economic strongholds that had to do with marriage. Anyway, all of which is to say, I love, there's many male writers who I have always loved and continue to love, and I certainly don't discern between men and women in that way. I don't decide who to read based on that. And I actually I don't think that men are any worse at conveying the sorts of love that I'm interested in than women. I don't prefer to read women on love. I find that to be a bit transcendent, and there's lots of things I would rather read women on, but this is not one of them for me.
Okay. მადლობა ყველას მოგზაურობისთვის და როგორც გითხარით Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank
you very much, Megan. Tamta, dato დიდი მადლობა. მე დაგიანონსებთ დანარჩენ საღამოს 8 საათზე ქვევით ეზოში იწყება ძალიან საინტერესო საუბარი. წელს არის 100 წელი გავიდა